cried a river over
Hello everyone and welcome! Happy Monday! How are you doing? I hope you're doing fine and well. Okay, today I feel the motivation and the obligation to share with you. If you are not ready reading Tori Maras alias Chaos Coordinator at I Don't Exist Story, today we have a fresh, recently out of the oven article from the great Tori. I wanna read it to you because she writes so well. I feel I can read better than usual when I read Tori, and this might be a very important issue as well. So let's start. The Turkey Doctrine or Turkey Doctrine, Part 1, The Architecture of Impunity by Tori. You can find all her work in torisays.com and all the past podcasts archived in torisaid.com. April 2026. The Western foreign policy establishment has spent 2 decades misidentifying the source of regional instability in the Middle East. How's the music? Too loud? Iran was not the engine of the chaos. Iran was the vehicle. Understanding what actually drove it and who fueled it requires a rigorous examination of the evidence that was hiding in plain sight inside NATO alliance that could not bring itself to confront one of its own members. Yes, Turkey. Or Turkey. There is a question that the foreign policy establishment in Washington, Brussels, and Tel Aviv has consistently refused to ask with any seriousness over the past 2 decades. The question is not complicated. It is, in fact, almost insultingly simple. Is from an insult? Insultingly simple, yes. If you remove Turkey from the equation, does the regional threat architecture that we attributed to Iran still function? Oh, a very good question. If you remove Turkey from Europe, can Turkey fuel Iran? We don't know. Let's see. The answer, examined with analytical rigor rather than institutional convenience, is no. It does not function. It does not even cohere. What the Western intelligence community and its affiliate think tank ecosystem spent years characterizing as Iranian-backed terrorism was, in its financial and logistical architecture, something considerably more precise, a threat network that was Iranian-branded but Turkish-enabled. Iran was the operational phase, the Revolutionary Guard, the Quds Force, the ideological framing of Shia resistance. Turkey was the financial nervous system, the procurement corridor, the sanctions evasion infrastructure, and, in several cases, the geographic transit route for materials that should never have moved at all. This distinction is not academic. It is the central analytical question of the post-Iran moment, because when the United States and Israel severely degraded Iran's military and regime capacity beginning in early 2026, a question emerged that policymakers were not prepared to answer. Why are the terror cells still operating? Oh, good question. Why is the financing still flowing? Why is Hezbollah still receiving support? Oh, the answer is that neutralizing Iran neutralized the brand. It did not neutralize the infrastructure. The infrastructure built over 15 years through Turkish banks, Turkish shell companies, Turkish sports, and Turkish diplomatic cover exists independently of the Iranian regime that fronted for it. In 1952, bargain and the 1952 bargain and the structural trap. Turkey joined NATO in February 1952 in what was then a straightforward Cold War calculation. The Soviet Union was pressing hard on the Turkish Straits, seeking warm waters access and threatening Turkish sovereignty. Turkey offered the alliance something irreplaceable, a southern anchor that controlled the Black Sea access and territory from which NATO could project power into the Middle East. The bargain made sense in 1952. Turkey's secular military establishment, shaped by Ataturk's modernizing project, was genuinely Western in orientation. Oh, I didn't know that. Turkish soldiers fought alongside Americans in Korea. Oh, Incirlik Air Base, built between 1951 and 1952, became one of the most strategically significant installations in the world. Housing nuclear weapons, launching U-2 spy missions deep into Soviet airspace, and anchoring NATO's entire southern flank. What the founders of NATO did not build, and what their successors never corrected, was the mechanism for accountability. The North Atlantic Treaty contains no provision for the suspension of membership rights, no provision for expulsion. The architects considered including such mechanisms and rejected them. That decision, reasonably in the idealistic post-war moment, became the structural foundation of Turkey's impunity 7 decades later. Wow, what a great article! When Turkey began to change under Recep Tayyip Erdogan's AKP government after 2002, there was no institutional mechanism to respond. There was only the original bargain, now severed from its original context, providing protection to a state that had transformed into something the bargain's signatories would not have recognized. Without Turkey, the threat that wasn't self-sustaining. To make the analytical case that Iran functioned as Turkey's proxy rather than as an independent threat actor, we need to examine what Iran was actually capable of without Turkish financial and logistical support. Iran's economy was under comprehensive sanctions. Its currency was in structural collapse. its banking system was largely cut off from the international financial system. This is not a description of a self-sufficient regional hegemon. This is a description of a state under sufficient economic pressure that, without external relief, its capacity to fund a multi-theater proxy network should have been severely degraded. It was not degraded. Hezbollah continued to receive funding estimated at hundreds of millions of dollars annually. Hamas built a sophisticated tunnel infrastructure and weapons stockpile. The Houthis acquired ballistic missiles and drone technology. The question is not whether Iran directed these operations. It did. The question is where the financial oxygen came from when Iran's own economy was being asphyxiated by sanctions. On the record, the Halkbank case, a U.S. federal prosecution in the Southern District of New York, established that Turkey's state-owned Halkbank participated in a scheme that moved billions of dollars in Iranian oil revenue through the international financial system by converting energy payments into gold trades falsely presented as humanitarian commerce. Cooperating witness Riza Zarab testified about direct involvement at Turkish cabinet minister level. Wow. On the record, the Davutoglu admission in January 2026, former Turkish Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu confirmed on national television that Ankara deliberately constructed alternative financial channels to bypass US sanctions on Iran as matter of conscious state policy. This was not an allegation. This was a former head of government admitting it on camera. On the record, Treasury OFAC designations. Between 2020 and 2026, the US Treasury designated dozens of Turkish registered entities for participation in Iranian procurement networks. Shell companies providing dual-use technology, aviation components, and equipment to Iran's defense industrial base. Very in the nose. On the record, Hezbollah's Turkish cash pipeline in early 2025. Israel lodged a formal complaint to the UN Security Council with specific flight numbers documenting commercial flights from Turkish airports to Beirut carrying suitcases of cash to Hezbollah. The forensic evidence is not ambiguous. Remove Turkey from that equation. Iran's proxies lose their primary financial lifeline. Their ability to import weapons technology is severely curtailed. The threat architecture does not disappear, but it becomes substantially less capable and substantially less deniable. The nuclear highway, Turkey as transit corridor. There is a second dimension that received considerably less sustained attention despite years of documented incidents. Turkey's emergence as the primary transit corridor for nuclear and radiological materials, moving from the former Soviet space toward the Middle East. Intelligence and non-proliferation analysts have a documented term for the smuggling route that runs from Russia's poorly secured post-Soviet nuclear facilities through the South Caucasus, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and terminates in Turkey, from which materials can reach Syria, Iraq, and Iran within days. The term used in official US State Department non-proliferation reporting is the nuclear highway. This is not a metaphor. It is a documented trafficking route with confirmed incidents spanning 3 decades. In 2016, the Georgian police conducted 3 separate nuclear material seizures in a single year, unprecedented. In January 2016, 3 Georgians were arrested attempting to smuggle cesium-137 across the border into Turkey. In April 2016, 6 persons were arrested in Tbilisi attempting to sell weapons-grade uranium enriched to approximately 90% for $200 million. Wow! A second group was arrested days later in Kobuleti, 50 kilometers from the Georgian-Turkish border, in possession of additional weapons-grade material. Wow! Turkey as documented destination. Georgia's former Deputy Interior Minister, Shota Utiashvili, stated plainly, "The deals on nuclear materials happen here every year. People regularly smuggle radioactive substances from Russia via Georgia to Turkey or Iran." Time Magazine's 2017 investigation described the route with geographical specificity. From Georgia's border, nuclear material could reach Turkey within hours and Syria or Iraq within days. Turkish seizures. Turkish security forces reported multiple seizures of suspected nuclear materials in vehicles on Turkish roads. Ankara 2018, Bolu Province 2019, and Kütahya Province 2025, all involving materials moving through established Caucasus transit networks, all with unidentified buyers. Yeah, sure. In 1999 Bulgarian border case, Bulgarian customs seized highly enriched uranium being transported by a Turkish citizen who had first attempted to find a buyer in Turkey. The material was weapons usable. This incident is documented in official US intelligence community nuclear smuggling chronologies. Al-Qaeda's test in Turkish occupied Cyprus. So, Al-Qaeda's test in Turkish-occupied Cyprus. Al-Qaeda in Cyprus, in the Turkish part. Testimony at the 2001 East Africa bombing trial, provided by Al-Qaeda operative Jamal al-Fadl, documented that dirty bomb materials, including uranium, were tested in 1994 in Turkish-held northern Cyprus, occupied Cypriot territory under Turkish military control, served as a testing ground for terrorist nuclear applications. I'm not going to the beaches of Greek Cyprus either after this information. No, what a sad news. Nuclear material does not spontaneously organize itself into smuggling networks. No, it moves when there is demand. Oh, that's important. And it routes through jurisdictions that tolerate the market. The Turkish state, with its territory serving as the primary transit and market corridor for nuclear materials across 3 decades, has consistently failed to address the structural conditions that make it so. Erdogan is coming to the focus. The 2016 inflection point when impunity became permanent. The moment that defined the subsequent decade came in July 15, 2016, during the coup attempt. Turkish authorities cut the commercial electricity supply to Incirlik Air Base. American combat missions were grounded for a period measured in hours. the United States found itself with its nuclear weapons at Incirlik effectively held by a foreign power that was simultaneously accusing Washington of engineering the attempt to overthrow it. The appropriate response would have been a serious structural review of the Incirlik relationship and Turkey's NATO standing. That review did not occur. The electricity was restored, Erdogan was praised for surviving a coup, and the alliance moved on. What NATO communicated to Ankara through its silence was this: there is no action Turkey can take against a NATO ally, including temporarily holding the alliance's nuclear weapons hostage, that will produce meaningful consequences. Wow! The signal transmitted in the summer of 2016 licensed everything that followed. Just before Donald Trump came into his first term. No coincidence there, I guess. The documented pivot away from Turkey, 2017-2026. The Western military establishment did not sit entirely still. Quietly, methodically, the exit ramp was being built. 2017, Germany removes 250 soldiers, 6 Tornado jets, and a tanker aircraft for Incirlik to Jordan's Al-Sarq Air Base, after Turkey bars parliamentary access. First major NATO ally departure from Turkey in response to Turkish behavior. Good. The good Germany of the 2017s. 2018, U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Wes Mitchell travels to Athens and discusses relocating a significant portion of U.S. military assets from Incirlik to Greece. U.S. MQ-9 Reaper drones begin operating from Larissa Air Force Base in Greece. 2019, Turkey takes delivery of Russia's S-400 system. US removes Turkey from the F-35 program and imposes CATSA sanctions. Simultaneously, the US and Greece update the 1990 Mutual Defense Cooperation Agreement, granting American forces expanded access to Alexandroupolis, 40 kilometers from the Turkish border, and Souda Bay in Crete. US begins $150 million upgrade of Jordan's Muwafat Salti Air Base. In 2021, second MDCA update expands US access to 4 Greek facilities. Pentagon allocates $42 million for Greek military infrastructure through 2026. $42 million, of course. 2022, following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Turkey closes the Bosphorus to warships. Alexandroupolis immediately becomes NATO's primary alternative logistic corridor to Eastern Europe. Thousands of pieces of equipment move through the Greek port to Bulgaria, Romania, and Poland without Turkish permission. Turkey simultaneously holds Finland and Sweden's NATO accession hostage for 20 months. I remember that. Turkey simultaneously holds Finland and Sweden's NATO accession hostage for 20 months. Yeah, I remember. 2025-2026, Pier K-14 at Souda Bay expanded to accommodate nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. Permanent MQ-9 Reaper fleet established at Larissa. U.S. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs visit Souda Bay. NATO deploys Patriot batteries to protect Kursk radar because Iran begins targeting it, demonstrating both its importance and the existential risk of its location in a country whose reliability is no longer assumed. The thesis that changed everything. In April 2026, the Foundation for Defense of Democracies published Turkey, the New Iran. Wow! Former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett declared, Turkey is the new Iran. A former US director for the National Counterterrorism Center posted publicly that American withdrawal from NATO would be specifically motivated by the coming Turkey-Israeli confrontation in Syria. Wow. These statements represent the mainstream foreign policy community arriving belatedly at an analytical conclusion the evidence has supported for years, but the framing is still incomplete. Turkey is not the new Iran, as if Iran's diminishment has created a vacancy that Turkey is now filling. Turkey was, in the most consequential sense, the architect of what we called the Iranian threat all along. Good clarification. Consider the analytical test. Remove Turkey's sanctions evasion infrastructure from the equation and ask whether Iran's proxy network, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, the Iraq PMF retains the financial capacity to operate at the scale we observed between 2011 and 2026. The answer is that it does not. Iran's economy, under comprehensive sanctions, was not self-sustaining as a multi-theater proxy sponsor. The money that kept Hezbollah operational, that funded Hamas tunnel construction, that purchased Houthi ballistic missile technology, that money traveled through Turkish financial infrastructure. Clearer the water. Iran provided the ideology, the command relationships, and the deniable attribution. Turkey provided the financial oxygen, without which none of it was sustainable. This is analytical inversion. This is the analytical inversion that Western policymakers have been unwilling to state plainly. In the functional architecture of what we called Iranian-backed terrorism, Turkey was not a peripheral enabler. Turkey was the primary financial infrastructure operating under the protection of a NATO membership that made it effectively immune to the consequences normally applied to state sponsors of terror. I wonder if that wasn't calculated, not a coincidence. Iran's degradation in 2026 has made this architecture visible in a way it was not before. The sales did not stop when the Iranian brand was neutralized. The financing continued. The networks adapted. What changed was the label, and the removal of the label revealed the infrastructure beneath it. An ally that cannot be expelled, cannot be meaningfully sanctioned, and cannot be confronted without strategic cost is not an ally. It is a protected adversary. Understanding that distinction and what it has cost the Western alliance over the past 2 decades is the starting point for understanding what must be done now. Part 2 publishes next, The Financial Machine. Okay, thank you very much, Tori, and everybody here. I hope you enjoyed my version of the article. So, thank you very much. See you the next one. Goodbye and good night.
by the river